First, you will be, and the recording is in progress. First, you will be hearing from Greg Lynn, who is a professor at AUD, has been here since 1997, not that anyone's counting. Greg is the leader of the Arrival and LA28 Studio in the MSAUD program, which could hardly be more timely. Greg has been at the intersection of the digital and the physical in both architecture and design culture generally. He's the founder and owner of Greg Lynn Form and the co-founder of the robotics company Piaggio Fast Forward. Among many other honors, Greg has been named by Time Magazine one of the 100 most innovative people in the country, or in the world, excuse me, for the 21st century, among, again, many other accolades and honors. We'll also hear from Natasha Sandmeyer, who is the studio leader of the Entertainment Studio. Natasha's work, teaching, and research connect and straddle the world of architecture and visualization. She has a longstanding focus on the role of media within the creation and the production of speculative architectures and speculative environments. She leads the Entertainment Studio here. She has previously been at a number of institutions, including the Architectural Association, the Verlage Institute, SciArc, and has published a number of books and led a number of exhibitions. She's also the founder and director of the Los Angeles-based offices Office UR and Hour Plus. And again, she leads the Entertainment Studio here. We will hear from Güvenç Özel, who is the director or the studio leader of the Technology Studio. Güvenç is a cyber-physical architect and critical technologist. He's the founder of design practice Özel Office, and he's worked at a number of offices, including those of Frank Gehry, Raphael Vignoli, and Jürgen Meyer, among many others. He's worked with a variety of media, with a variety of technology companies, and a variety of innovators over his career. He's worked with Google, Autodesk, Microsoft, and NASA. He uses extended reality, or XR, artificial intelligence, interactive sensor systems, and robotics to create objects, experiences, and environments that are synchronized and responsive to human presence and senses. And then last but absolutely not least, you'll hear from Jeffrey Inaba, who is the studio leader of the Urban Strategy Studio. Jeffrey is the co-founder of Inaba Williams Architects. He's interested in knowledge that's gained from the profession and the practice of architecture, especially ideas about urbanism, typology, and building technologies. His firm is based in LA and in Brooklyn. Clients include Red Bull Music Academy, YouTube, the Whitney Museum of American Art, BMW, Mini, New Museum, the Van Allen Institute, and Public Art Norway. He has also served as a principal at AMO. And those four lead the different studios within the MSAUD program. You'll certainly hear and get to know them a lot more over the course of the next hour or so. I should note that they are program directed by Valerie LeBlond, who has been at AUD here at UCLA for a few years and leads an incredible program at the Ideas Campus for us all. So thank you, Valerie, for organizing this and for giving us so much inspiration and so much to work with. So each of our four studio leaders will present for a few moments. After their presentations, there will be the opportunity again for some Q&A. So please do consider some questions or some thoughts that you may like to share and take advantage of during this time. Again, feel free to drop questions in the chat and I will do my best to bring them to everyone's attention. Before I officially hand the mic over to Greg to kick us off, I do want to verbally note a few interesting events that we have coming up across a couple different verticals here at AUD. Today is the Meet the Studio Leaders event, so thank you again all for joining. On Tuesday, March 1st at 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, Natasha Sandmeyer will join a couple of current MSAUD students to present an info session. Again, that's on Tuesday, March 1st. I will drop some registration links for this event and others in the chat. And of course, you'll be hearing about this in much of our upcoming communications. Then that Thursday, March 3rd, we are holding a noontime, 12 p.m. Pacific lunchtime talk involving Greg Lynn alongside AUD's Dana Cuff, who leads a number of important initiatives here at AUD, and Christopher Hawthorne, who is the Chief Design Officer for the City of Los Angeles, as well as the longtime former architecture critic for the Los Angeles Times. Beyond that, on Friday, March 11th, there is going to be a symposium or a panel involving recent graduates of the MSAUD program, talking about their career starts, what they learned from the program, and how it has situated them to go on to do great things. Beyond that, We're looking up towards a March 30th and 31st open house for AUD. And then Friday, April 15th will be the deadline for statements of intent to register. So again, a range of events. I will drop information in the chat so that you can browse and register at your leisure. But that said, I think that's enough talking from me. I would love to hand things off to Greg Lynn to talk about the Arrival and LA28 Studio. So thank you again.
Great, thanks, Travis. So I've been asked to just say one introductory thing, just to answer the question, what is research in architecture and what's special about ideas? And you're going to hear this from everybody, but being in California and in particular Los Angeles, I mean, we're now the center for the most innovation in automobiles. We're where a lot of technology gets launched. We're where bird scooters get tested. We're where we have climate disasters on a regular basis. It's a place where there's a lot going on, and we don't really believe architects should sit around in their office waiting for somebody to call them and give them a site and a program and a budget and then have them do the services of design. We think architecture is a much more civic and connected and entrepreneurial practice than that. And we try to train everyone to think that way. And so what you're going to see across all four of us is that we try to bring an approach to design which is expansive, and it involves new technology, it involves new cultural trends, it involves new ways of living and moving and experiencing the world. So that, for us, that's really what this program is about. We don't need to have a fixed curriculum. It's really driven by individual faculty and their teams. And so that's what we'll talk about in the next few minutes. So this year, we're looking at reconfiguring streets. And when I say that, it means that after COVID, well, during COVID, a lot of stuff moved outdoors. Automobile spaces were taken over in cities for dining, for shopping, for socializing. And we're looking at that this year is something that we might want to keep permanent. So we're looking at the street as an infrastructure for civic life that might not be limited to transportation and automobiles, but also events and amenities. We're engaging large events, and in particular, we're thinking about the Olympics, but so we're thinking large scale, not just street furniture. And we're looking at how that would be manufactured. We're doing that, and I always like to teach with some form of a partner that's pulling us into unfamiliar territory. And so here we're working with a transportation company in the UK called Arrival, but they're really, I mean, they make delivery vans and buses and rideshare cars, all for public use, all electric. But actually what they're doing is building micro factories. So they have an approach to manufacturing where they take a factory, put it on a boat, and deliver it to their customers. So if you're Federal Express, they drop a factory right next to your Federal Express headquarters and start making Federal Express vans. And they make tens of thousands of vans until they're done, and they pack up and they move on. And that's to save energy, that's to save transportation costs, it's to be more sustainable and energy conserving and frankly cheaper. So we're looking at this idea of bringing microfactories to Los Angeles and rethinking the street. In the last Olympics in Los Angeles, there was the most sophisticated transportation control system on earth implemented, where in LA you can shut a street down in less than 30 seconds and reroute traffic. It's all digital, more sophisticated than Uber or anybody else's system still after 25 years. So we're engaging also with the city of LA and thinking about the Olympics. This is a view from the last Olympics, and doing that through the lens of Arrival. So this is one of the Arrival microfactories and their founder. And we're really thinking about this in terms of not transportation, but logistics, how things get made, how they get moved, and how they get deployed throughout the city. This is I was last week in London, well, outside of London, visited 6 of the Arrival microfactories, but you can see here they're building everything from buses to delivery vans, and all very thoughtfully designed as well. And the students are engaging with a little bit that sensibility to see how their architecture can have a conversation with some of these plastic composite manufactured devices. And thinking at the scale of, if you can build a bus with a microfactory, how could you use that same equipment to build architecture? So they're thinking a lot about manufacture, and this is one of their composite plastic weaving operations. And all of this is now connected to the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, which is really a transportation and mobility Olympics. In LA, we don't need to build a stadium. We don't need to build an archery center. We don't need to build an ocean for a triathlon. Everything exists here and more. So you don't need to build a single facility. What you do need to do is move 12,000 athletes around every day. You need to move spectators around and think about what the impact is on the city and the legacy in terms of civic space. So our plan is take over as many streets as possible and turn them into civic spaces. This is just a view of the students are working. Initially, we worked in teams for about 3 weeks. We broke down the different venues and picked one site on Venice Beach, which you see here. We picked another site in Exposition Park, which is adjacent to downtown. We picked another site right downtown at the Crypto Center, which is where the Lakers play and where the Microsoft Center is, the convention center. And we picked the Athletes Village, which happens to be at UCLA. So these are the 4 sites everyone's looking at. Everyone developed master plans that would leverage Arrival technology and experience of the Olympics, and then leave some of this behind as a legacy, as well as moving some of these elements to other places in the city. I'm not going to go into each individual project, but as a kind of master plan strategy, the students in teams of 3 work together to come up with some form of a group alignment. And then they go into their each individual project using some of the systems of the microfactory and logistics in each project, but looking at very different topics and different experiences. So these are just some examples of 3 of the group's work, showing individual student projects, but then how they connect to the systems site-wide that they come up with strategically. We put a big focus on clear thinking and presentation and communication here. So the students all do that when they're working together. And then in terms of architectural expression and style, that's not something I teach you. I assume you have your own interest coming in, but we mentor everybody to develop their own kind of vocabulary and thought. And again, always in alignment with Arrival, and not just with their technology, but also their kind of thinking in terms of grid architecture and microfactories, and even some of the aesthetics. So that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
And again, with Winter Olympics ongoing, could hardly be more timely conversation among so many other angles and topics. So thank you again. I would love to hand the mic over to Natasha Sandmeyer, who's almost fresh off a site visit in not Burbank, but close, who's going to talk about the Ideas Entertainment Studio.
Okay, do you have my screen? Excellent. Yes, I have a couple of images of our site visit that I'll be showing in a sec. All right, so yes, I'm Natasha Sandmeyer, and I'll present the entertainment studio that I teach together with Nathan Sue. And really what we do is explore the power of storytelling and how that can inform how we design, how we live in, and how we communicate those stories of the city and the world around us. And so we position ourselves at the realm, there we go, it's written on there, between fact and fiction. We really aim to build a culture of storytelling, to create the kind of tales that set the spaces and cities that are set in those kind of spaces and cities. So we make films, we design games. Students right now are working on installations. We're negotiating the space between architecture, world building, media, and narrative. And that's really the kind of context of where we are. And so ultimately, we also really focus on looking at the world from various perspectives and how we deliver those perspectives through visual storytelling. We also, of course, meet with guests and have workshops with, in the most recent past, with VFX artists, with concept artists, production designers, and architects to think about how we can also work in a much more cross-disciplinary manner to begin to think about how architecture can have impact and agency across a whole range of disciplines and forms of media. So I'm going to show now mostly examples of student work. Some of it, this first video is a compilation of the past 2 years. Then the next one is a short video of what we did in the autumn term. So you kind of get a sense of what students can do after the short October, November, December. And then a couple other quick words on seminars. All right, so what you see on screen, again, is just the work from last year and the year before. And I think importantly, it kind of highlights the kinds of visual storytelling that we focus on in the studio. And while the images don't necessarily speak directly to this year's brief, because it's kind of an encompassing of 2 and 3 years of brief, I really do think it's the best way to communicate what the studio does, to show the kind of work and worlds that we build in order to talk about what it means to be an architect and a storyteller designing, speculating, and innovating today. So you can see on the screen kind of our deep interest in looking at the ways in which humans have affected and changed the world. That's really primarily the focus on the studio and where we look to mine spaces for stories, whether those are industry, agriculture, or other kinds of social constructs. And so this current year's brief is titled Landscapes of Change. And we're really looking at the regions and landscapes around the world that have undergone massive transformations. Because humans have been responsible for, as you I'm sure know, a staggering amount of change all over the world. Industrial forces have paved entire forests, they've cut off mountaintops, they've redirected ridiculous amounts of water, and, as in the previous scene, ridiculous amounts of waste and garbage. Cities have exploded with growth. We've changed the climate itself, leading to many catastrophic weather events that pummel and reshape the ground. And so this year what we're doing is examining that world and looking for places to intervene with what we are calling docufictions, a kind of, I guess, blending of what it is to make a documentary and what it is to speculate, and thinking about how those 2 forms of storytelling can work together. Our narratives are really rooted in the realities and the spaces of our present. And so we're using speculative fiction not to predict the future, but in a way to think through and design the world that we hope to inhabit. So rather than ask students to address really broad planetary issues, we look and work much more regionally and think about how we all have that agency and relatability in a sense. And so our world building does draw from a rigorously researched understanding of the history, the rituals, the industries, and the social constructs of that place, of that environment. And the fiction comes from the details and the subjectivity that you add to transform the scene in that world from something familiar to one that really suggests a parallel and yet often uncanny world. And so it becomes a world building really rich with detail and context. And so what we do is we look at broad cinematic sequences that expose and characterize the qualities of place and of conditions, so the ways in which we engage with the city and our kind of understanding of the world as architects, alongside our ability to tell stories as filmmakers and storytellers. And so we blend the real and the speculative to build sense of mood and atmospheres, and what we're calling this year is these rich environmental portraits. And so what we've really discovered, and it's probably pretty obvious in looking at the past 2 years of looking at radical change across the planet, is that what happens at the macro really does exist at the micro. What happens over there in places we might be researching in far distant locations also happen very much right here in Los Angeles, that those conditions and the ways in which we're transforming the world are much more global. And so we are, of course, acknowledging the world is an interconnected web of cause and effect. And to that end, this year, we've really moved the brief to Los Angeles. And we're looking closely at the city, the county, and the region to pinpoint the industries and the landscapes that are here going through phenomenal change and transforming the place that we know. And so, in addition to the studio, Nathan and I each teach seminars. This is a brief video kind of, I guess, introducing the idea of the research seminar that I teach as a companion course to the studio. Last quarter, it was called What's for Breakfast, which was essentially a class on world building and world coherence. And we used Margaret Atwood, the writer of the book and, of course, popular TV show Handmaid's Tale, amongst many other novels that she's written. And she has this really interesting quote where she says she uses the breakfast table as a way to begin her world building. And so when inventing a new world, what she does is she thinks about the breakfast table as the starting point to speculate on that world. And so she imagines where they got the food. How was it harvested? How was it cooked? How was the meal paid for? What is the currency? What are the rituals of exchange? Is there technology at the table? And so by designing something as simple as a breakfast, you can kind of develop an entire economy, a culture, a set of social interactions and behaviors, and you essentially can imagine and design a society from a table. And so that's the research seminar. And I'm going to show also now, this is a much shorter video, which really is a compilation of work from September to December. So you can get a sense of what students are able to accomplish in the first quarter. And so we really, again, thinking through the context of the brief of this landscapes of change, what students did was really make short films exploring the narratives in large-scale industries. So from the previous set of scenes, a massively large open mine and pit in Germany. They speculated on a moment in 2030 when the mines would finally close. Here, other students developed a story and set of visuals imagining a future where carbon capture technology is advanced. Right here is a group who made a beautiful film about the massive logistical undertaking, building a new city in the Chong'an region west of Beijing. And so rather than focus on the massive upheaval and construction of buildings and urban strategy, they really looked at the millions of trees that were brought in and planted, all organized and cataloged and installed via this unbelievable complex matrix and tagging system, ultimately by QR. Students looked at complexities of international shipping and supply chain. And here, this final project on the Three Gorges Dam, which married the construction of one of the largest infrastructural projects ever with a wedding. So really bringing the political and the personal together in a single story and looking at the timeline of the things that we build, whether massive regional water moving projects or relationships. So as Travis mentioned, yes, we did visit yesterday, thanks to Valerie's introduction, Nant Studios, which is a pretty awesome virtual production studio in El Segundo, and had a really fantastic tour. They also share space with Epic Games and Unreal Engine, so we're hoping to kind of further weave our way in and through that kind of amazing space of companies and opportunities. And so they gave us a really fantastic tour. We met with the technologist as well, who was super helpful in explaining a lot of the kind of finer points. And what's great, and the timing of this is also connected to Nathan's studio, where all the students are broken up into teams, exploring all the various technologies that we have available in the Ideas campus, and they're essentially developing manuals of use for each one. And so, oh, I forgot I have a little video. But just to point out, so on last Friday, we also went to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, which was also a really actually excellent tour. And tomorrow we're going to Warner Brothers movie studio tour and meeting with someone who did the sound design on Argo and ironically, The Quiet Place. And then, okay, this is just a little grab of when he was moving the camera, and you can see the kind of space of focus move around this LED production wall. All right, and so just a brief couple notes on seminars. So again, one of the images showing the celebratory, again from the class, What's for Breakfast? The celebratory breakfast on the Bagger, the big mining machine in the Ruhrgebiet in Germany. Their scenario was celebrating the end of coal mining in Germany, which is set to expire in 2030. And so alongside the composition of the image, they designed the menu and the event that you can see in the background, which is this big kind of concluding event of the coal mine. And 2 or 3 of the bagger operators were having their own celebratory breakfast on the mine. And so in their kind of document, you have the whole history and logistics of the construction of this breakfast, including character development for the people on the bagger. This quarter, we've also been doing quite a lot of work, really analyzing a set of completely different kind of sets, movies and narratives, looking at the ways in which directors and production designers conceptualize and develop their aesthetic editing and visual attitudes. And moving into Nathan's technical seminar this quarter, students in small groups, again, have chosen a particular technology and are developing a manual for how to use each one. So the entire studio has access. So in this case, looking at developing a manual for VFX compositing, looking at how to embed the kind of digital objects in a student's workspace. We have one team who's doing a very small scale version of the production studio that we visited yesterday. So this in a Costco apple pie lid container, but really following the same kind of principles, except instead of the, I don't remember how many million LEDs there were in that wall, but instead of the LED wall, really using a piece of paper and a projector to accomplish the same relationship between the digital camera and the physical screen space. And another team is working on making digital humans, which we had actually a really great conversation with the head of NAT Studios yesterday as well, because they have this incredible production space, but then they need all the props and assets to populate that space for digital production. And so the ability to make assets and props as opposed to go to 3D warehouse and be beholden to whatever's in stock there is something that we have a couple of teams working on as well. The end. All right, that was it. Thank you.
Is it ever really the end?
Also a good question, good point.
Just the beginning, just the beginning. Thank you, Natasha. Super cool. I would now love to hand the mic over to Güvenç Özel, who's going to give us an introduction and a little bit of a dive into the technology studio at Ideas.
Hey, hello everyone. So my name is Güvenç Özel. I lead the technology studio at Ideas, but as you will see while we finish the presentations, like most of every studio is engaged with the question of technology across the board. So I would like to, in a way, provide a context for the kind of research that we do specifically in the technology studio, which is thinking about this notion and researching this notion of a cyber physical architecture. So what we mean by cyber physical architecture is this intersection of multiple different methods in which the digital and the physical world interact with each other in a spatial manner. So just for the sake of communicating the principal topics of investigation for the studio, I divided this presentation into 3 categories. The first being robotics, the second one being machine learning / AI, and the third one being the metaverse, which is primarily extended reality applications. So In that context, what we are investigating is actually how does architecture, a technologically enhanced form of architecture, or interpretation of architecture purely as space that we occupy, not necessarily a physical space. It could be a social space, it could be a virtual space. And how can it be a platform for presence and action? And in that context, we're primarily zeroing in on this relationship between media and space. And we are using, as I said, a number of different tools to facilitate that. Some of these tools are mostly, like they don't require any kind of physical interface, such as machine learning, procedural modeling, encoding and programming. And then there are other tools that either allow you to change something in the physical environment, such as robotics and sensors, or allow you to access a virtual or a non-physical environment through your senses, such as VR headsets, AR headsets and devices, and thinking of broader applications of telepresence or being present in a space that you're not physically in. So let me start with the robotics, and we have been doing a number of research projects with our students at Ideas in robotics, but the most recent one is an in-house platform that we developed that allows us to control our large-scale industrial robots with our virtual reality technology. And this is something that we have developed ourselves and given access to the students. And I will show you momentarily how the students have used this technology. Other scales of robotics actually go all the way down to DIY robotics, where our students think about architectural systems that have some kind of physical computing system integrated into it. And these kind of small scale robotics allow the students to prototype interactive systems almost as architectural models. And we also utilize our small robots while we do these kinds of explorations, thinking about ways in which robots actually interface with the world. So adding robots onto robots as end effectors, and thinking about ways in which we can explore multiple scales of interactivity through robotic systems as we move forward. And then, primarily our robotics explorations have been in the scale of interaction, but we have also done some set of one-off fabrication projects. But if your interest in robotics is in fabrication, we would primarily focus more on methods in which we can involve the human presence, and rather than thinking about robots purely as devices of automation for production. So in that context, even in large-scale robotic systems, what we have explored in the past is always thinking about full-scale architectural prototypes and how the robots could be used as methods to, in a way, transform the world around us rather than build the world around us. Moving on to machine learning and AI systems. We use machine learning systems primarily for design collaborators. There are a number of algorithms that we teach our students over the years in order to envision a new type of collaboration between humans and machines. And traditionally, the machines are used to automate mundane tasks. That is applicable not only for hardware systems, but also for software interfaces. And instead of thinking about that, or thinking about the use of technology in design as a kind of a parametric system, we actually engage machine learning algorithms in the concept design phase, so that the formal vocabularies or different kinds of design possibilities could be proliferated by machine learning, rather than envisioning the human as the sole kind of creative actor in the design process. So the images that you're seeing is how our students in the past used machine learning to generate imagery in the urban scale. And these usually happen in the scale of kind of a sense of photorealism. And the students work with multiple different types of data sets. In this case, those data sets being urban scale data sets. So that requires a pretty prolific and detailed analysis and understanding of a certain set of urban parameters in order to teach a machine to, in a way, envision and start to create different iterations of those systems. And then following those kinds of back and forth between, our interventions as designers versus how the machine can kind of proliferate and automate a certain set of qualities or traits. The students later on used advanced 3D modeling systems to three-dimensionalize, so to say, these imagery. And these are some of the environments that they have produced as a part of that. And so we use these systems not only as a means to, I would say, teach our students how to expertly learn and execute a particular type of technique, but it is very much so intrinsically linked to, I would say, the philosophy of engaging technology as a political as well as theoretical companion in the studio. So a lot of these kind of urban environments that they've created address very contemporary issues that the world of technology addresses. These range from topics such as data privacy in the urban environment all the way to environmental concerns and anthropogenic climate change. So we engage broad spectrum of topics and contextualize particular technological paradigms within those topics. Moving on to another scale, we also use machine learning systems in architectural scale. And these kinds of explorations mostly manifest in the scale of formal expression. So the series of videos that you're seeing is a series of buildings that are generated through machine learning systems where the students engaged a broad spectrum of inspirations that are typically outside of the domain of architectural research, such as the world of art and fashion and other forms of design and image making, and use those systems as data sets to train the machines to create different kinds of iterations in order to guide them in their design process. So the kind of flickery image that you're seeing is what you get from the machine. And then the three-dimensional contextualized videos that you're seeing is how our students in a way interpret what the machine is creating. And then creating a more coherent design in order to architecturalize in a more expertly manner the kind of imagery that is being created. So moving on to the metaverse or the extended reality systems, there's a lot of debate. It's a very hot topic these days, but I'm happy to say that Ideas was one of the first places where XR technologies were being explored in the architectural scale. And we started our XR lab in 2014. So we have made quite a lot of headway in exploring virtual environments as legible and fruitful architectural spaces. So these are some of our earlier explorations that you're seeing, where different types of interactions were explored, where the scale could be transformed, where environments could be proliferated through user interfaces, where different alternative methods of interacting with the world, such as looking or proximity, were explored, and also thinking about the virtual environment as a design environment, where the user interaction with the environment would build and unbuild that space. And thinking about also using the virtual environment as a design platform, but also the virtual environment as a way to transform the physical environment. With the help of robotics, we have explored multiple different kinds of systems where these kinds of interactions could take place. And through the new tools that we developed, as I mentioned earlier, we could synchronize the virtual world with the physical world and in a way, create architectures that have an ability to transform and change both virtually and physically simultaneously. And also we looked into methods in which we could look at natively digital and virtual social environments and thought about ways in which we could actually bring them into the physical world. So instead of just constantly trying to virtualize everything, we also looked into methods in which we could turn natively digital systems into physical interfaces, such as social media. We also explored, starting in 2015, a kind of a crude version of, I would say, virtual production, where we explored the transformation of these systems real time, so that people who are not necessarily wearing particular interfaces like headsets could still visualize and experience the virtual environments through the application of different kinds of media technologies, such as projection mapping. So we thought about the spectrums of reality that a person can experience through the help of many devices or no devices at all, and thought about ways in which how we can actually engage a media saturated version of architecture through different scales of immersion, and how those scales of immersion could be mediated by different types of media technology applications. And lastly, I would like to wrap up by talking about a few projects that we have done over the years in the tech studio where all of these systems are combined. I think what is interesting and fruitful about this notion of cyber-physical architecture is that architecture is, in a way, a platform for these multiple technologies to be synthesized, and a space where you could actually, again, experience a spectrum of realities, rather than thinking about this kind of separation between digital versus physical, augmented reality versus virtual reality. When designers are trained with the right approach towards using technology with this kind of mindset, which is actually exactly what we teach in the technology studio, I think very interesting outputs and possibilities emerge. These are some of the early experiments of robotic control through virtual reality systems. These are, again, thinking about human-robot collaboration for craftsmanship and architectural, as well as furniture scale exploration and fabrication. Thinking about ways in which how robots can do what they do best and how humans can do what they do best, and how we can actually merge these kinds of collaborations together between humans and robots for production of objects and spaces. And one last thing that I would like to show is a series of projects that our students developed while they were in remote learning last year, throughout the entire year of the lockdowns and the pandemic. We actually gave a VR headset to each of our students and gave remote access, real-time remote access to our physical robots in the Ideas Lab, so that our students, no matter where they were in the world, could actually virtually be present in our robotics lab, and they could transform these robots and their positions real time, and they could actually program virtual objects to affect the position of the physical robots real time. And it created a platform where all of these ideas and technologies that we have been exploring and envisioning to actually happen in a strange way, enforced on us through the realities of the pandemic. And some of these videos that you're seeing is, as you see in the video, there are avatars of our students, where the student teams of 2 would actually be able to collaborate real time in the robotics lab while one of them was in China and the other one was in Turkey. We really kind of like, in a way, use this unfortunate reality as an opportunity to really push the limits of these technologies, these spatial technologies that we've been exploring. So I just want to say very loosely what's to come next year, and in the kind of explorations that we have done over the years, we have positioned always this kind of intersection of architecture in the physical and the virtual world. But what we would like to do next year is actually take the virtual world a little bit more seriously and think about ways in which they could contribute to the discourse of architecture, because architecture has a long tradition of producing environments and spaces, not necessarily solely for the motivation of building buildings. Then in that regard, how can we create a new type of design paradigm and design goal for not only producing new types of architectures, but also think about the new parameters for practicing architecture. So some of the topics that we aim to explore next year is this notion of virtual architectures, also designing for the extended reality environments, and also thinking about the notion of space as blockchain, and thinking about how we can contribute to the world of NFTs and be engaged with that world. And also what would be the new paradigm of practicing architecture in Web3, and how the new type of economic possibilities with these new emerging models of practice could actually reform and transform the way in which architects produce, share their work, and also monetize on their work. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Güvenç. And I do want to get over to Jeffrey Inaba so we can hear all about the Urban Strategy Studio.
Hey everyone, hi, I'm Jeffrey Inaba and I lead the Urban Strategy Studio. We are witnessing dramatic changes to our world where, as architects, we can only address them at scale, meaning that the solutions that we can provide need to be of a much larger square footage and impact than traditional architecture can provide. And so with the Urban Strategy Studio, we've been looking at ways in which we can address some of these issues, and specifically climate change and its effects on the increased intensity, speed, and frequency of wildfires. The conventional notion is that after a wildfire occurs in a given area, that the area has about 5 to 10 years before another major fire will occur. However, that's changed in the immediate past. For example, in Sonoma, there's been a major fire for the last 6 years in a row. And so we're looking for solutions that precisely take advantage of what Greg was talking about, and that is that as Californians, we are inherently designers to the world. So there's some statistic where something like 40% of your day involves interacting with something that was designed in California. And so the idea that those kinds of innovations in technology paired with the witnessing of major disasters like this is something that we want to capitalize on, to think about what our capacities as urban designers can be to work at scale. Next slide, please. So the goal is not to make you experts at wildfire, but rather for you to be able to learn research and design skills that you can apply anywhere. So while we'll be looking at conditions that take place in California, the intent is for you to learn research methodologies and creative design skills that you can take with you wherever you may be after you graduate. And those are the things that we'll focus on, is the universal knowledge that you will be able to apply. Next slide. So in terms of the findings for the research that we've done on wildfires in along the wildland-urban interface has been really quite startling. In addition to the frequency and increasing scale of fires, we found this thing that's called irrational development. If you can go to the next slide. And as far as we know, this is original research that no one else has documented, let alone tried to tap into the condition. And that is that anywhere where a fire has burned a neighborhood, the property value increase is greater than adjacent areas that were left undamaged. Meaning that it's totally counterintuitive to what you would think, that areas that are safe from fire, that haven't burned within the last 10 to 15 years, increase in value at a much slower rate than those that have had repeated burns. And this pattern is consistent throughout LA County and is most prevalent in the area of LA County that's called the LA Fire Corridor in the Santa Monica Mountains, which has witnessed over 45 fires in the last half century. And so we're looking at ways in which we don't slow down this phenomenon of irrational development, but in a judo-like move, we try to embrace it, to think about new typologies of urban residential living that could take place in this highly sought after, yet incredibly dangerous area. And then the next slide, please. Another thing that we have discovered is that those areas in LA that are at high fire risk also have the highest level of biodiversity, both in terms of plant species and animal species. So it means that after a fire occurs, it's vital that we have recovery systems in place that allow the biodiversity of the area to again thrive, both in terms of vegetation, but also in allowing for the animal food chain to recover by allowing for wildlife corridors in the area that could also be areas that are used for evacuation in future fires for animals, and also areas that could be used for vegetation replanting. And so maybe the most emblematic animal of this wildlife biodiversity condition in LA is the mountain lion. The mountain lion was for many years decreasing in population. It's now increasing in population despite the fact that its habitat is diminishing because of the impact of wildfires and the growth of construction in the wildland-urban interface. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the projects from last year created a natural habitat within the Santa Monica Mountains that could also serve as a wildlife corridor to get across the major points in the Santa Monica Mountains that limit the habitat and migration of animals. At the same time, that it could be used as a education facility that would be on a massive scale, that would be akin to the historic philanthropic landmarks in LA, like the Griffith Observatory, the Getty Center, and a number of other mega projects of this scale. If you go to the next slide. In addition to the studio and research seminars, we host workshops and try to create workshops around people who guest lecture as part of the larger department lecture series. So that includes Kai Uwe Bergman, who's the managing principal at BIG, who's an alumni of the architecture department at UCLA. So he did an urbanism workshop and has continued to participate in the program by being on reviews and doing workshops virtually. Next slide. And in addition to that, we have been fortunate pre-pandemic to go on field trips, including to Mexico City, to look at phenomenon of urbanization in cities that are experiencing the same kind of transformations because of climate change. In the case of Mexico City, water rise and water level rise and water pollution in the larger region. This year, fingers crossed, the studio will be going to Tokyo in the late spring for an exhibition and symposium of the work that occurred last year in the program and this year. And that symposium and exhibition will be also attended by students from 10 other Pacific Rim universities that participated in the ARC-DR3 Regenerative Urbanism Initiative that was organized and started here at UCLA by Professor Hitoshi Abe. Next slide. We're also really grateful for the collaborations that are ongoing. The Bergruin Institute is a philanthropic organization based in Los Angeles that's actually doing a campus that rivals the scale of the Getty and the educational research proposal that you just saw. We're working with them to do a number of community outreach workshops to better understand the concerns of residents who live in the wildland urban interface. And we'll be working with them to create a publication and then a series of planning recommendations for LA City in those areas. Along the lines of the integration of technology, we're working with ETH Zurich, which is the global leader in 3D printing and fabrication. This is a project of theirs that involves projectiles. They're shooting clay cylinders up into the air and using a program that they developed, the way that the cylinders land create a tectonic wall form that can be air dried and work as load-bearing walls. So we're working with them and the knowledge that they've gained in the over decade-long study of 3D printing to create 3D printed fire-resistant housing prototypes. And so that's what the studio is focusing on this year. We received a grant from UCLA to use the robots at Ideas with fire-resistant materials to create these prototypes. And so that's what the students are working on this term for their seminar and in the studio next semester. Thank you very much. And all four of us look forward to answering any questions that you have.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you everyone for your presentations. Super fascinating, super inspiring, super informative, so thank you. Please do chime in with questions. This is a terrific opportunity to get a little bit of face time and get some direct feedback and some insight from our faculty. If you are in any way feeling camera shy, which I relate with, feel free to private message me or drop a question in the chat and I'll bring it to the surface. Know that we do have a series of events coming up, admissions oriented and otherwise. I dropped some information about those in the chat. So should questions arise either right after you leave this Zoom or at some point in the next days and weeks, know that there will be some opportunities to hear more and to ask some more questions. But that said, if any immediate ones arise, or perhaps not a question, a thought, now is a wonderful opportunity. And while folks think about that, I will just kind of verbally go through some of what we have coming up. So this was our Meet the Studio Leaders event, and I want to thank everyone in Val again for organizing this and for joining us. Natasha will give an info session alongside some current MSAUD students on Tuesday, March 1st. There is a registration link for that in the chat, but absolutely ping me or send me a chat if you cannot access that for any reason. That will be, again, an opportunity to hear a little bit more about the program and specifically to hear from some of our current students about how their year of study has been going. That's on a Tuesday. That Thursday, March 3rd, Greg joins Dana Cuff, who is a longtime UCLA and AUD faculty member, as well as the City of Los Angeles's Chief Design Officer, Christopher Hawthorne, for a panel talk about the City of Los Angeles and some relevant urban strategy and urban design questions and topics. Again, that's Thursday, March 3rd. There's a registration link for that event, which will be held virtually. Registration link is in the chat. Just seeing if there's any questions. Going down the pike a little bit, Friday, March 11th, there's a registration link in the chat for an MSAUD Alumni Symposium, a chance to hear from some recent graduates of the program about what they learned, what they were inspired to pursue by and through the program, and where their careers in their investigations and research have progressed since then. So again, that's Friday, March 11th, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and that will be held virtually. Save the date also for Wednesday, March 30th and Thursday, March 31st. Those are our AUD open house events. We will be refining and organizing the schedule quite a bit in the coming days and weeks. So please do stay tuned for more information about specifically when to attend MSAUD specific and focused programs. But those will be the two dates on which we hold our general open house for MSAUD as well as our MARC and BARC programs. So a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe. And then for those of you who are admitted to the program, the deadline for statement of intent to register will be Friday, April 15th. So that all said, this has been an incredibly informative and inspiring event. I joined AUD just this past November, and I'm surprised and challenged and pushed into new directions almost every day here. In this event, this past 60 minutes or so has been a crystallization of a lot of that. So I'm constantly learning more about our ideas program, about our MSAUD program and the different studios, in part because the studios are dynamic and take on real world, real-time questions and challenges and topics. And they do so in this setting of Los Angeles, but also, of course, the global and virtual contexts. So there's almost always something new to discover or think about or be inspired by. And again, while I personally haven't been here that long, I keep finding new corners and new sides of the prism, for which I'm very grateful. And I directly thank the 4 studio leaders in Val here today for a lot of that. So barring any questions, which please do not hesitate to drop them in the chat now before we shut down for the evening or for the morning, depending where you are. But please do stay engaged and stay tuned for future events and in future moments, whether that's the open house events at the end of March, whether that's that March 1st information session, or whether it's that March 3rd, less admissions focused, more of a general interest event. These are all great opportunities to engage with AUD, to engage with design, to engage with some of our faculty and beyond. Oh, and there is a question. How do the ML models learn to simulate or augment existing urban settings, since what is good or defining a good loss function seems like a hard problem? Who wants to take that one?
I can do it. I'm assuming that that's, addressed to some of the things that I talked about. So basically, when we use machine learning in urban design and exploration, it pretty much depends on the data set and how the students create that data set. And they are, in a way, the curators of the data set. And they determine the parameters of the output design by deciding what they want to include in the input. So, for example, some of the imagery that I have shown was actually iterating on the impact of sea level rise and what kind of new urban forms could emerge. And in order to do that, the students crafted a data set that showed an iteration of an area with a new type of shoreline. And then they thought about different kinds of global trends in terms of investment, in terms of architecture, in terms of how these different kinds of forces actually affect the built environment. And they curated a data set, for example, for Florida that consisted of existing American cities as well as different Asian cities, as Florida is getting a lot of investments from different countries in Southeast Asia. So the idea was that the architecture of that environment would transform according to the new realities of demographics and flows of capital. So that's kind of how we use, in particular, generative adversarial networks for the purposes of new types of urban design.
There's another question. Aside from the studio you choose, are there any other labs or collaborations between different studios, for example, urban strategy and technology? I can take that one, I guess. It's easy. The studio environment at the IDS campus is very open and collaborative in the sense that we're all sharing one big space. And for the first section of the program, the first quarter in the summer, all the students are together following the, we call it the boot camp. It's like a big studio where you get to learn all kinds of skills and get immersed in all 4 studios' philosophies and get to know each other. So there's tons of collaborations then. And of course, following that, everyone goes into their specific concentration for the rest of the year, but there's opportunities in the critical studies as well as the technology seminar so for critical studies, everyone is together. And then for technology seminars, there's options for you to take the seminar of another studio. And so you could be an urban strategy student that then go on to take a technology seminar studio in the winter and join that course, for instance.
Thanks, Val. And I'm going to drop a couple of additional links in the chat related to that question. There are a couple of different design labs and research units based at AUD, and there's certainly plenty at UCLA. As a nationally renowned research university, there's a lot of different research currents and interests and possible collaborations lurking here on campus. So I do want to take a moment to highlight a couple. I'm going to drop, again, these into the chat. There is the X Lab, which is led by AUD's Hitoshi Abe, who is our former chair. X Lab is an international think tank that examines architecture's elastic boundaries through interdisciplinary collaboration. So that is definitely something worth checking out and thinking about in terms of different opportunities and different research extensions that you might be able to pursue. And I also want to give a little love to AUD and UCLA's City Lab, which is led by Dr. Dana Cuff. City Lab is considered a collective laboratory. They work on projects involving architecture and urban research, situated within the Department of Architecture and Urban Design here at UCLA. And they tackle a lot of problems and questions, including affordable housing, mobility, transit and transit equity. And it really does synthesize a lot of the questions and topics that have come up in different ways throughout some of these presentations today. So those are just 2 examples of some of the applied research initiatives that percolate and that execute on projects here at AUD and UCLA. And if you're like me, I think you'll find that there are so many others waiting to be discovered. Good stuff. Good stuff. So
I just want to add, Travis, to the question about collaboration. So with the Urban Strategy Studio, we've been fortunate to collaborate directly with X Lab on the project that deals with the 11 universities along the Pacific Rim. In doing so, for the very first time, an MARC Advanced Studio and an Ideas Studio have been working side by side. So for the last 2 years, the MARC 1 third-year studio and the Urban Strategy Studio have been working on parallel projects, and we've shared tours, guest lectures, review resources, planning and research resources, and that kind of collaboration is something that we'll continue to do in the future, and it's something that we're hoping to do with other units within the department and potentially across the university. We're collaborating with the engineering department on material science research, for example.
Cool. Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, as I noted, the research opportunities and collaborative opportunities at UCLA are so broad, and there's so many of them. And I'm just starting to learn about some of these different connections, and a lot of them do take root here at AUD, a lot take root elsewhere and come to AUD in some way. And it's been fascinating to watch some of that take shape. And hopefully some of you will have a hand in shaping it and leading it. Another question. The Redefining Streets program is pertaining to the Olympics in LA28, or is it going to look at streets beyond and what happens to them once the Olympics is over? I do know Professor Lynn has had to step out of the info session, I believe. So I don't necessarily want to steal his thunder or give any spoilers. I do have to imagine that a part of the question is reuse and what happens to this infrastructure, soft and hard infrastructure, after the Olympics come and go. I'm not exactly sure I could be as conclusive or definitive about studio outcomes. In Val, I'm not sure if it's something that we're yet able to forecast or think about, but it certainly would be a good question to bring into the investigation. And I do imagine it would come up and will come up in various ways, directly and indirectly. Well, barring any other concluding thoughts or questions, or again, thoughts or questions, we will have this event recording made available for future viewing and consideration. And I think you've heard about some of our upcoming events, so I will spare you another 30 seconds of my talking. But that said, truly, thank you, everyone, all of our guests and attendees. Thank you for all your engagement, all of the consideration and time and thought you've put into your process, whether that's preparing your application, attending events like this, in taking in and considering the huge array of opportunities that I'm sure lie just ahead of you. And I do hope that you continue to engage with AUD and with the Ideas program, with the MSAUD program here at AUD. Know that, yes, we do have a number of events coming up. Whether you want to attend the March 1st info session, the March 3rd lunchtime talk, or some of our other events down the road, please do take advantage of those. I'm going to put my email address in the chat here in case you have any questions for me. I'll also drop the General Ideas email address for general program questions, which I have a feeling Val is the one who answers those. So know that there are some friendly and eager faces on the other side of these emails who are ready, willing, and happy to source information, provide answers, and guidance as you navigate these next few weeks. One question that just came up, Val, when would the application results for the program be out?
In the next 2 weeks.
Ooh.
Some
Not
even
that
as early as next week. So
Not that anyone's counting, right? Cool. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Val, for organizing this. Thank you to our studio leaders, Güvenç, Natasha, and Jeffrey, and to Greg. And thank you again to our guests and participants. We have really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better the past couple weeks, in the past hour or so. And I hope you feel the same about us. So thank you again, and please do continue to be in touch.